1, 2, and 3 of Project 1 in our statistics course, and this video will deal with question 4. Question 4 will create histograms for the frequency, relative frequency, and cumulative relative frequency of the heights of soccer players. So again, we will do this online in Microsoft Online, and we will also do this in Microsoft Desktop. So we are continuing from where we left off. Let's read the project instructions. It says that the question is, let's find out here. Hold on. All right. Fill out the distribution table using the Excel calculator and create histograms. In B55, B64, and B65, the table has heights of soccer athletes, is already created with classes and frequencies from the example in our book. So here we can see that the variable x is the height in inches, and we have classes of heights 59.95 to 61.94 inches, 61.95 to 63.94, etc., up until the highest, the tallest height class will be 73.95 to 75.94. And in B55, they want us to type an interpretation of what the frequency is based on the context of the problem. So here in the frequency column, we see these numbers 5, 3, 15, 40, 17, 12, 7, and 1. And this again is a table of the heights of soccer athletes. So here are the heights, and they want us to explain to them what is the frequency. The answer should not say frequency. Frequency doesn't mean anything to anyone other than the statistician. So we want to explain to the audience, the people who will be reading this table, what that might be. Frequency is the number of observational units, in this case of athletes who have that specific height, all right, with that specific height. So usually the title of our graph will say something that descriptive. Here we would probably just say number of athletes, which describes the frequency. So after we do that, it says in B64, use AutoSum or sum to calculate the sum of the frequencies. Let's use AutoSum, which will populate the sum by itself. It gives us an array from row 56 to row 63 in column B. Here they want the formula without the equal sign, so sum B56 colon B63. And then unfortunately the sum here is 100, so the numbers here that we will see as relative frequency and cumulative relative frequency, which is percentages, will seem to agree with these frequencies, but this is not necessarily true all the time, especially if the total is not 100. So let's continue. We type the formula. We want to highlight the titles and data of the X and F columns. From the Insert tab, insert the bar chart, resize the chart to fit in the space indicated. So we are going to do a histogram, but we are not going to use the Excel's histogram. And the reason we are not going to use Excel's histogram is that Excel, especially here on the left, the data is not considered numeric, But Excel, when it does a histogram, so if I selected the histogram here, it would just decide on itself, and it will consider the values of F to be the data values, when actually our data values are height in inches and they are in classes. So we want to use a bar graph and make it look like a histogram. So under recommended charts, I'm gonna enter this, which is a bar graph. And first of all, let's make it a histogram. To make it a histogram, we want the gap width between the series to be 0. So I'm going to right click on one of those bars, and then I'm going to format the data series, and I will change the gap width to 0, which now makes it a histogram. Now, if you click out of it, you will see that the bars are now just meshed together in one drawing, which is great for what we will be doing later in the course. But for now, I would like to be able to see each one of these rectangles separately. So I'm going to go back in here under the bucket and give it a border. So let's get a border that is black so that I can see the rectangles. There we are. Let's see what else they want us to do here. Explore the options for quick layout or design to ensure that you have a numbered vertical axis. Make sure there is no legend titles series 1 in your chart, and there isn't one. If there was one, I would want to remove it. Do I have a numbered vertical axis? Yes. Add elements to your chart with a plus option. You need a title, you need axis labels, and data labels outside. Right, so let's try to do that. So I'm going to be on my chart either with a plus, or if I was in insert, okay, when I'm here, either with a plus or with the top left where it says to add chart element, I will add, I have axis, I need axis titles, I need a chart title, I need a data label outside. And the data labels showed up outside here. What is the X, the horizontal axis? The horizontal axis is the height in inches. So you have to describe the variable and also describe the units. The vertical is the frequency, but we are not going to write frequency because when we are presenting statistics, we want to present in plain English. So we are going to write number of athletes, and the description here will be number of athletes with a specific height. Let's change it, right? With a specific height. And because this is a title, let's capitalize the letters. And here is my histogram. Now, let's see if they need us to do anything else here. Format the series to change the gap width to 0. So we already did that. That's what makes it a histogram. And after that, we are done, and we will move on to the relative frequencies. So first of all, we want to understand or interpret what is a relative frequency from the context of the problem. Relative frequency is the percent of observational units in a category. So this will be percent of athletes at that specific height, right? With a specific height. So of course you could just say percent of athletes. This would have been the title of your vertical axis because that's what will be on the vertical axis of your histogram. And to find percent, if you remember from the previous questions, we divide the number in the category with by the total. So if I press here equal, because I need to use the Excel calculator to find that, the number of athletes in the first class, 59.95 inches to 61.94 inches, is 5. And then I want to divide it by the total, which is in location B64. So B56 divided by B64. And this is in percent form. If it comes as a decimal in your file, you remember how to change it to a percent from the previous questions. So again, here I want to do equal this number of athletes in this class divided by the total number of athletes, and keep going. Now, if I have thousands of rows, I really do not want to be typing this by hand because it defeats the purpose of using a tool that has much more potential. So what you can do in Excel is actually you can copy a formula and it will carry the locations of the variables with it. So if I copy this formula that divides the quantity on the left with the total in the bottom, if I copy it and I paste it in the next location, it will give me an error, and the reason it will give me an error is because it actually moved everything down one place. If I try again and I copy it here, so let's say I copy the formula from row 57 to row 59, it will again have a problem because it will have moved everything one row down again. So even though the total number of elements in the category is correct, which is what I want, the total overall of the total athletes that I am investigating, I'm surveying, is no longer 2 rows below. So if you want Excel to move things as you move into the spreadsheet, you will not touch these locations. But if you want Excel to always have a static cell that it uses to calculate, so my total is always in location B64, then the way to do that is instead of having B64, a variable location that will move with you, to use the $sign. When you use the $sign in front of the column B will not change. So if you move left and right, it will stay in column B. If you put a $sign in front of the number of the row, which is 64, then the row will not change. So as you move down, it will still reference row 64 for you. If you put $signs on both the column and the row, then that cell will always be cell B54 that it will be dividing by. And actually this is B64. And this is exactly what I want. So I want it to always move to the next row for the total in this category. But I want the overall total of 100 to always be considered in the denominator. So if I do that now, and I copy this cell and I paste it on everything else, it will actually give me the correct answers. So when I am, let's say, in row 60, it will have divided the frequency in row 60 with the total, which is still in row 64. And then when I'm in the next one, in row 61, it will have done the frequency of row 61 with the total that is, again, still in the same location, B64. So the project tells you that if you want to calculate the relative frequency, you want to type for the first class B56, which is the frequency of that first class, divided by B $64. And the reason is that we are staying in the same column. When we are in C column, we just stay in C column, so we are actually not moving right or left. But we want the row with the total to always stay 64. And then convert it to percent and round it to the nearest whole percent. We copy cell 56 and paste it all the way to C63. Excel will adjust the numerator for every ratio, but At the same time, it will keep the denominator to be in the cell B64, and that is because you used the dollar operator. And then in cell C66, it wants you to copy the last formula. So this formula that says B63 divided by $B$64, it wants that copied in cell C66. There we go. And notice here that the project only wants us to keep the $sign on 64, which is actually the only thing that we need to do. But I have used the $sign in front of B as well, which didn't do anything. It just verified that if I were to move right or left and wanted to use the same formula, I would be able to still have a denominator at that location where the total number of athletes was calculated. So the next part is to create a relative frequency histogram. And to do that, we have to highlight the height and the relative frequencies. And the problem with trying to do that is that you will end up highlighting the frequencies as well, and you don't want them. So to highlight non-adjacent cells, you need to highlight one column first. So I'm going to highlight the heights only. Then I'm going to let go of my mouse or my pad or keyboard. And then I will go to the title for the relative frequencies that says % of athletes. That's cell C55. But before I click on it, I'm going to press Control. So I'm going to press and hold the Control button, and then I will highlight now the parts of column C that I want, and then I'm going to let go. So now I have highlighted the column with the relative frequencies and the title, holding down the Control key. After that, I'm going to insert the graph. So I will insert a bar graph. I'm going to move it to the desired location. I will resize it. I will add axis, axis titles, chart title, data labels. I will update the axis title to be heights in inches. I will update the vertical title not to say relative frequencies, but to explain what is a relative frequency. So it will say % of athletes, and the title % of athletes with a specific height. I need this to be a histogram. Histogram means that the bars must be attached to each other. This is a numerical and continuous heights values, so we want them to be next to each other. So I will format the data series with a gap width of 0, and also let's give it a border that is black. And here we are. Okay, cumulative frequency. What is a cumulative frequency? A cumulative frequency is when you accumulate data values in a bucket, and that bucket of values includes everything you have seen before, prior, plus your current category. So a cumulative relative frequency is % of athletes with height at most, let's say with height less than or equal to the current group. So % of athletes that are as tall or shorter than this particular height, right? So % of athletes with at most a certain height would have been a more concise chart title. Now, how do we calculate this? We know that in the first group, the cumulative relative frequency will be only 5%. So per the project instructions, it says just make it equal to 5%. But then in the next group, that there are 3% of our athletes with heights from 61.95 inches to 63.94 inches, the cumulative relative frequency will be this 3% plus the 5% that we were have calculated before. And to find this, we will add the 3% to, so plus, the cumulative relative frequency calculated so far, which is above our row. So it will be over here, 5%. So here we have 8%, and 8% is the 5% of athletes in the first class plus the 3% of athletes in the next class, and it is the percent of athletes that have height less than or equal to 63.94 inches. To find the next group, the next cumulative relative frequency, we will be looking for athletes who have height 65.94 or less inches, and therefore that will be, I want the 15% and the 3% and the 5%. And to find that, I will add the 15% to whatever I have already found before, this 8%, which is right above me. And if you notice here, this is a pattern. For the next box, I will have to add whatever percent of athletes is in the current category plus whatever cumulative relative frequency I have calculated before. So this is always what's happening. When I am in the second row, I have added the percent of athletes in the current category and the cumulative relative frequency above me. When I was in the third row, the percent of athletes in the third category plus the cumulative relative frequency above me. And this pattern moves with my cell. As I move one row below, it moves also one row below. Therefore, I can just copy this formula and Excel will actually do it automatically for me. I don't need to use the dollar sign because I don't want anything to stay constant. So when I am in the sixth row here, where it says 92%, the way I found this was I added the current percent of athletes, which was 12%, to the already calculated sum of cumulative relative frequency, the relative frequencies that I had already done of 80% that was right above me. So to understand or to verify that my cumulative relative frequency chart is correct, the last quantity must be 100%, which will include all the data on the table. And they are asking us to write this formula. This formula is the sum of C63 and D62. So we want to copy that in D66 without the equal sign. And again, I need to do that histogram. So I'm going to highlight the height column. I'm going to let go. I will move my cursor to the title for cumulative relative frequency, press and hold the control button and highlight the, okay, it didn't work. Let's try this again. Okay, there it worked now. Highlight the title and cumulative relative frequency values and let go. And now I'm going to insert a bar graph. And I'm going to move it in the desired location. And I will resize it. And I will make it a histogram. So format data series, gap width of 0. Let's give it a border, of a black border so we can see it. Let's add, with the plus sign, axis titles and data labels. And the bottom is the height in inches. This is the variable that we are investigating. The category here is Still percent of athletes. This is the description of what the vertical axis indicates. However, the title now will explain to us what is the difference between relative frequency and cumulative relative frequency. So here, this graph says that we are showing you the percent of athletes with heights less than or equal to the current group, right? So let's edit the title to uppercase to capitalize it. Height less, let's say at most. Less than or equal to is at most. At most the current group. We don't need a period there. And this is how we will complete the graphs in Excel on the desktop. Now, how are we going to do that in Excel Online? So, same idea here. F is the number of athletes. Relative frequency is the percent of athletes. Cumulative relative frequency is percent of athletes with at most the current height. We want to add here, so equal the sum of, and the array starts in cell B56 and end in cell B63. I just dragged my cursor and over this group. The formula without it was the sum of B56 colon to B63. And then I highlighted the height and the number of athletes, the two titles and the values, and I will insert a recommended chart of this bar graph. So I'm going to insert that. And I will position it where it needs to go, and I will shrink it. It gave me the title of number of athletes, so I would like it to be a little better. So if I double click a few times, it says, what do you want it to say? And I want to say number of soccer athletes with a given height. Okay. If you noticed here, it automatically gave me an x-axis label, and it labeled it correctly, and the y-axis label, vertical axis label, and it labeled it with my title there. So I'm all set. The only thing that is missing is that this is no longer a histogram. So if I click on the bars of the series, now I am formatting the series, and I want the horizontal axis to have a gap width of 0. And then I also want the series to have an outline, and let's make it black. And here we are. Relative frequencies are fractions. They are proportions. To find the proportion, we divide the number of athletes in the current category by the total. The problem that we will have when we copy is that we will the denominator will move along with us. So we want the denominator to stay constant, and to do that, we will put a $sign in front of the row 64. When we do that, we will be able, let's try this again. So when I copy this, we will be able to have the denominator stay constant always in cell B64. I need to fill in the formula of row 63 in row 66. So the formula was B63. Okay, it didn't do it, so let's do it here. B63 divided by 63 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 divided be $64. That was the formula. And then I want to insert the chart. So to insert the chart, I will highlight the heights in the classes. I will let go. I will move my cursor to the title, percent of athletes. Before I click on that and select that column, I will press the control button and hold it. And then I'm going to highlight the title of relative frequencies and the relative frequencies. When I'm done, I will insert a recommended chart of this bar graph. And I'm going to move it in the desired location. And I'm going to resize it. It automatically gave me axis labels. I want to change this title. I want to double click on it. Let's say I wanted to say percent of soccer athletes with a given height. Okay. And I want this to be a histogram, so I will format this series to have under horizontal axis gap 0 and under series an outline of black. Let's not call it automatic because it makes it the same color, so a black outline. Awesome. Cumulative relative frequencies. How do I find them? The first one is just the percent of the first class, but every next one equals the percent of athletes in the current class plus the cumulative relative frequency calculated so far with all the previous classes. After I have created the first formula, I will copy this below, and I will verify that it is correct because the last one is 100%. The formula at the very end says that this is the sum of the formula on the left. I don't know if it's going to take it. Okay, it won't take it. So let me write it. So it was equal to the percent on the left, which is C, 63, plus the cumulative relative frequency above, which was D, 62. I will double check it by clicking here. C63 plus D62. Excellent, and I'm ready to enter the histogram. So highlight the height column. Let go. Go to the cumulative relative frequency column. Press and hold the control key. Highlight the column. Insert. Recommended chart. This bar graph. And move it in the desired location. One thing that we have forgotten to do here and we have to remember to do is to add labels outside. So this, we will edit the title to just say percent of athletes on the vertical axis. And then the title here explains what this is. The graph is percent of athletes with at most the current height. Let's edit. Format the series. We want the horizontal axis to have no gap width, 0 gap width. We want the series to have an outline of black. And let's toggle the switch for data labels, and we want them to be outside. And let's go do that in all the other graphs because we forgot them. So here, data labels, click on it. And then here, click again, and data labels, and we are all set.